share with us today some information that I think is relevant. And in addition to that, as this is being streamed right now, after the 11 a.m. press conference that the Premier has every day. Does she work weekends? She does. She does that every day, doesn't she? She does that.
No, she doesn't. I think some of the times on the weekend she doesn't front up. Brad Hazard's done it, I think, last weekend.
Okay, so she does get a day off where she doesn't have to front up. But Tim, how have you been, by the way?
Yeah, good, mate. It's you know, it is what it is, I suppose, as the old saying goes. But you know, I'm lucky. I've got a reasonable size home. I'm here with my wife, so you know, the two of us working home. So there's company, and we go for a walk each morning. So it's as good as it's going to get. But you know, like everybody else, I'm missing not being able to go out and go out to a restaurant. It's one of the things I enjoy doing, travelling and all that. So the sooner it's all over, the better. Tom, you and I have both had our shots, haven't we? We did it together.
Yes.
I've had mine, so I'm hoping that once everybody gets theirs, that we're on our way. But well, there are 263 new infections today, and there were 5 deaths. So, you know, we got to get it sorted out.
Yeah. And in addition to that, Tim, which we've got a PowerPoint document we're going to go through now that's relevant to agents in New South Wales, but we're also not going to go into too much detail about things that arose as a result of a press conference today, which I was alluding to with Gladys Berejiklian at 11 o'clock. But at a high level, we can confirm now that the Newcastle area is impacted. Correct, Tim?
That's right. That's right. I haven't got complete visibility on all of the local government areas in the Newcastle lockdown, but I'll do that over the next couple of hours. But we will be getting another public health order, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay. So, Tim, why don't I just actually come to share screen, bring it up here, and I'll run this PowerPoint document from here. And this is the real estate practices COVID restrictions. I'm going to go over to the first page here.
Yeah. So the first page is a little bit out of date now, Tom, because it says that there were 22 public health orders up until the 26th of June. But now there's 23, at least. I haven't seen the 23rd, but that's coming out, no doubt, over the next day or so, which would be which would reflect what's happened in Newcastle. So I just wanted to, and again, you know, my next slide is also out because now there's going to be 5 regions. So there is a regional area, as you know, and then Greater Sydney. Again, I think we're all across that. And then the affected LGAs, and there's 8 of them. So we're looking at Fairfield, Parramatta, Canterbury, Bankstown, that area. And then there's the 50-kilometre band that goes around the Greater Sydney area. And that's got special conditions applying to that. But as you can see, this PowerPoint's out of date because now we're going to have to look at the Newcastle area as well. But from what I'm told at the press release this morning, the media that our Premier did this morning, it appears that the Newcastle area will be the same conditions that are in the Sydney, the Greater Sydney lockdown. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Righto. So the stay home order in the regional areas, it's encouraged. So what the orders say is that if you can work from home, you should work from home. It's encouraged. But as you get into the more stricter areas, so in Greater Sydney, the restrictions on movement, the obligations is on the employee and employer. Now, Tom, I have to make this point clear. The employee has an obligation to work from home, not just the employer telling them to work from home, but the employee must make an assessment, and if they can work from home, they must work from home. Now, the employer has to be able to assist the employee to work from home. Now, when we get into the affected LGAs, it actually goes there into an instruction to work from home. But we'll go into that in a minute as well.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd quickly have a look at the regional areas because they'll be pleased to know that very few things have impacted them. They're really in a pre-COVID-19 position. It's probably why everybody's trying to move to the regional areas. Tom, life in the regional areas is a lot better.
Tim, mate, one day when you head out of Sydney, out of all the places, where would you go settle and end up living the rest of your life at? Have you thought about it?
Look, I got a couple of places. I like Albury. I just think it's a really pretty town. And might seem odd, but given the climate difference, but I also like Coffs Harbour. I reckon that to me is like that little. It's a I don't know, like an enclave of the tropics around Coffs. So I really like that area as well. But that'd be my two picks. If I end up looking for the tree change, I think it'll be Albury, and if I go for the sea change, I think it'll be Coffs.
I would never have picked those two areas, but
what are yours?
Northern Rivers, anywhere around. The technology partner that I've got and had for a number of years is in Mullumbimby. So anywhere, that Mullumbimby, Byron, that area. And then the other place that I've got to tell you, I like the Gold Coast. Oh, actually, that's not New South Wales. But I do like the Gold. Do you like the Gold Coast, Tim?
No, I'd rather go to Noosa than the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is a bit young for me, I think, these days.
When's your next holiday? Do you think you're having a holiday at Christmas time?
I don't know, mate. They tell me it's 3 lockdowns to Christmas. So that's the only joke I'll probably do today. Let me get rid of my phone. Somebody's probably complaining about me. 3
lockdowns to Christmas. I like that. 3 lock. Now, so tell me, if you're in these regional areas and residential and commercial, generally speaking, your life is normal. That's what you're saying in this slide.
That's right. Nothing has really changed for our friends there. Now, they've got to be mindful of the number of people that they can have at a property. So that's, as has always been the case now since March 2020, you've got to allow that 4 square metre space per person, maximum of 25 people. You've got to have a COVID safety plan in place. And this is the important bit for our commercial people, which will not make our folks in the Greater Sydney area too thrilled. But in the regional areas, agents can continue to show commercial property, okay, which is great. So they can do the resi and the commercial property.
Can I ask you, Tim? I live in the inner west of Sydney. Can I drive to Byron Bay to look at a unit that I've seen appear on realestate.com? Can I go there and look at a unit?
You can.
I can. Okay.
So it's one of the anomalies in this, but you can go and do that. Yeah. And I'll show you a little later on the presentation about how odd some of this stuff is, the anomalies in it all. But whilst you've raised that point, Tom, and it's a good one, if you do go to Byron Bay, I'm getting feedback from member agents in the field in the regional areas that when buyers turn up from the Greater Sydney area or the lockdown LGAs, that these people are the agents showing the property in the open. They're saying, no, we're not going to let you in. You're not coming in here. And that's a reasonable, in my view, it's a reasonable thing to do. Now that view may not be shared by a lot of others, but if I was running an open and I had my team there, if I was the licensee in charge, one of the questions I've got to say to myself is about the occupational health and risks that I'd be putting my people to by allowing people from the Greater Sydney area through, and that question's being asked, and also what I'm exposing the regional people coming to the open, what I'm exposing them to in relation to letting the Greater Sydney people go through. So my advice, however, it's a decision for the agent as to whether or not they'll let Greater Sydney people into their open that they're running in their regional areas. That's a question for them. If they choose not to let them in, then I think you need to make that really clear in your marketing, because you don't want a Tom Panos saying, hey, that looks like a really good property in Byron Bay, and I'm going to go up there. I'm going to drive all the way up there to have a look, only to find out that we're saying, no, you can't get in. So I think you've got to make it really, really clear that you can't see the property.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, Tim, you wouldn't want complications where the vendor that you're representing, gets the view and opinion, oh, well, that buyer could have paid $50,000 more for our property. And you have that added layer of complication. And then
you do.
And then you've got the vendor that says to the agent, well, who gave you the right to do it? Right? Like, is it law, or did you form that out of your own opinion? So I get that. But I think, Tim, would it be right to say even the people that are in the LGAs, for instance, the Canterbury Bankstown, they can still go to Byron Bay to look at a property?
They can.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's quite amazing. Yeah, they can, Tom. That's the short answer.
It is extraordinary when you think about everything else that you can and can't do. It is extraordinary, but I don't think it should be the first thing on your mind to start your property hunt for a property in regional Australia in the month of August. Maybe leave it. Let's move on. Must stay at home. Who's this for? Who must stay at home unless?
This is a worker. Now, what we were talking about there was a person that was going to go and buy a residence, okay? But in this circumstance here, we're looking at a worker. So you need two things. Firstly, you can't work from home, and the obligation is to look at what your work is and to make an assessment. Is it reasonably practical? And they're the words that are used. Is it reasonably practical for me to do my job from home? Now, if the answer to that is no, it's not, then we go to the second test, and you'll see there that I've written the word "and" in dark text and capitals. And the reason I've done that is because it's not one or the other, it's "and." So you've got to tick both these boxes. And then it has to be a reasonable excuse. You have to have a reasonable excuse to be able to go to work. Now, quite a lot of people don't have reasonable excuses. So if you look back a couple of weeks ago when the construction industry was shut down, and we put it through the test here, a construction worker can't work from home, so they tick the first box. But when they get to the second box, is it a reasonable excuse to leave home? They couldn't tick that box, so they were forced to stay at home. So in real estate, there will be instances where you can tick both boxes, but there'll also be times when you can't.
Is this slide relevant to who? Everyone?
Yeah, good question. It's relevant to every New South Wales worker.
Right.
All right, but only to the extent that they can tick both boxes.
Okay, got it. Okay, Greater Sydney residential. So this is, again, Tim, this is everyone, including the Canterbury. I'll just say Canterbury Bankstowns. That way, everyone knows we're talking about those 8 areas. So is this everyone?
That's well. Let me clarify that, because let's do the Greater Sydney area excluding the lockdown LGAs. Now, the good news here is, in my opinion, from my analysis of the public health order, I think, and this is the good news everybody wants to hear, Tom, I think you can go and do listing presentations in the vendor's home. and therefore styling, photographs, floor plans, and inspections. Now, we knew we could do the inspections because I think on one of the other podcasts we've done, or webinars we've done, I'm sorry, that we've talked about that you can only have one person with you, and you take that person in for the inspection. And this also applies to husband and wife. So even though the husband and wife live in the same home, drive in the same car, do all that, the public health order says that you can only take one person who's made an appointment before the inspection. All right, you can take them through the property. So one of the questions we get quite regularly. But now the other thing here, Tom, I want to make this point. In the regional areas, you saw me talk about the commercial property as well. I made the point of saying in the regional areas, you can go and do property management for commercial property if that was what you're required to do, etc. In the Greater Sydney area, you cannot, in my opinion, it is not a reasonable excuse to be involved with commercial property or with investment property or beach houses and these sorts of things. So
investment of residential.
No. If the person that is, you can show the property as a real estate agent, an investment property, but the person who is coming along to it, the purchaser, their reasonable excuse to be there is limited to buying a home for themselves. And again, we've talked about this, Tom. When you boil down the human beings, we need three things. They're non-negotiable. We need food, we need water, and we need shelter. So the water comes out of a tap, that's great. They've left the supermarkets open because we've got to eat, and they're prepared in the public health orders to allow us to go and find somewhere to live, somewhere to call home. You are required to stay at home, so you need to go and find a home to stay in. So the limitation is to residential. Now, with respect to commercial property, if an agent now, if they are required to go and deal with some emergency, so you've got a flood going on, water pipes, electricity, that sort of stuff, that's a reasonable excuse to go in there. But as far as going in there to show a commercial property for sale, my interpretation of the public health order is that's not a reasonable excuse. Tom, you asked a question about the Greater Sydney area when we were looking at listing, styling, etc. My interpretation of the public health order permits us to do that work in the LGAs that are locked down. That's my interpretation. However, I'm not as solid on that as I am in the Greater Sydney area. So I have written to the Department of Health, and I have said to the Department of Health, can you give me some guidance on that? And I'm waiting on a response. So Greater Sydney, I'm comfortable with that.
So I'm clear. Canterbury Bankstown, can you do a listing presentation?
On the way I read it, I think the answer to that is yes. And those other things that are on the list. However, what's making me a little bit nervous about it is some of the other restrictions that are on people in that area.
Got you. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Now let's go.
Now, so this here is the travel restrictions, and this will demonstrate why I'm nervous. So you have travel restrictions in relation to Greater Sydney. Okay, so the determination whether or not you whether or not you are what's called an effective worker within the Greater Sydney area is whether you live or work in the Greater Sydney area. So you could live outside of the Greater Sydney area and and be travelling in there each day to go to work. That's fine. The office is there, and so you are captured by that. But you can also, with travel restrictions, people in the regional areas can travel into the Greater Sydney area, but again, they need a reasonable excuse to do it. And similarly, somebody in the Greater Sydney area can go out into a regional area. These are workers I'm talking about now. These are real estate agents. They can go out into the regional area if they have a reasonable excuse. Now, there is this 50-kilometre band that goes around Greater Sydney. If you keep yourself as a real estate agent within that 50 kilometres, then you don't need a COVID test. If you go beyond that, you have to have a COVID test every 7 days, and you have to carry evidence on you that you've had a COVID test. Now, you don't need the results, but you do need to have demonstrate that you have had a COVID test.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is all making sense. You do feel for some of the, I mean, I lined up for a COVID test the night before last. It took me 1.5 hours. And, you know, sometimes, Tim, you think to yourself, man, like all I had was a small snizzle, you know, just a bit of a thing, right? But you just think to yourself, even when you've been double vaccinated, you still think to yourself, I don't want to be a contributor or a transmitter, right? So yeah. I better go. And then I thought to myself, man, 90 minutes, you know, I had the radio on listening, but there are people that are doing this now pretty much every second, third day, isn't there, Tim? You know?
Yeah, well, if you, yeah, you're right, Tom. And every time I hear on the news that there's been 100,000 people tested, that sounds great. You know, you're thinking these people are lining up to do that, and they are lining up. But everybody that lives in those LGAs, the lockdown LGAs, for them to leave that area, they need to be an authorised person. And the only authorised people are the essential workers, which are the ambulance, doctors, nurses, these sorts of people are authorised people. But even being authorised, they can only leave that area if they are tested every 3 days. So I think those 100,000 people that we hear about constantly being tested, a great deal of them would be those folks.
The same people.
Yeah, every 3 days.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the affected LGAs, and again, we spoke about Fairfield and Parramatta and Canterbury, Bankstown, and the rest of them. There are travel restrictions here. Now, this is odd, because remember we spoke about people in the regional areas can go in with a reasonable excuse, and people in the Greater Sydney area, they could go across one another, and that's actually covered off in the orders. So that is actually spelled out in the orders. And this is the reason I was concerned, is because I can't see anything in the orders that stops somebody. And again, when I say somebody, I'm talking about real estate agents. I can't see what stops a real estate agent going into the local government area. It doesn't feel right to me. You know, it just doesn't feel right, but I can't see how you stop. However, somebody that is in the local government area cannot come out. Now, we spoke a little bit about the test as to whether or not you're an affected worker, as the term is given, in the local government area. And it is not about working there and living there, which it was in the other one. It's about living there. So if your home is in the local government area, then you are an effective worker in that area. As a real estate agent, you'd be an effective worker. What comes with that is that you cannot leave that LGA. So if you're in Liverpool, you cannot leave Liverpool. Now, we spoke earlier about, can you do your job at home, and is there a reasonable excuse? Now, in this instance here, if I live in Liverpool and my office was in Liverpool and I can't work from home, that's okay. I could, and again, you can't just say, no, I want to go to the office. You have to demonstrate it if called upon. So if I make the decision that I cannot work from home, not reasonably practical for me to do it, that's okay, that you can go to your office in Liverpool. However, if your office was in Parramatta, you can't. It is not a reasonable excuse for you to go beyond your own LGA. You are locked in your own LGA, all right? And you cannot go and show property in another LGA. You must stay there, and that's the difference.
Just another good reason on why you should live and work in the same area.
Yeah, but this is where this is why I'm trying to get some clarification, Tom, because if we live outside of those 8 LGAs, if we do, then the way it appears to me is if I can go anywhere I like as a real estate agent, as a worker, affected work, I can go anywhere I like in those LGAs. But I'm not comfortable giving that advice that people can do that. And I say that because it just doesn't feel right. Now, again, you'll see on my slide there that I've written to health, and I want them to tell me what the answer is. The next thing I should just highlight, Tom, is maybe it's on the next slide, Tom. Yeah. So it isn't, but I'll bring it in. This is all about residential property. That's what it's about. I apologise to our friends in the commercial world and in selling holiday homes and that, but this is all about residential property. That's where the reasonable excuse comes in. Now, in relation to buyers, we spoke about that. There are no travel restrictions, and that to me seems rather odd. So if I'm in the Liverpool area and I'm a real estate agent, I cannot go outside of Liverpool. That very same person, that real estate agent that is in Liverpool who can't leave Liverpool, if that person then says, well, I'm going to go and look for a home myself, somewhere to live, they can then leave Liverpool and go to Byron Bay and look for a property. Well, go up there to actually see a property that's been
it's weird.
advertised.
It's weird, but I can see why they've allowed it, because they're sort of saying the person needs to go buy a home to live there, right? So I can see there, but it is weird, and if you were doing that, you'd be crazy to have the boogie board in the car.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're 100% right. So I just want to say something about masks. If you are silly enough to look at the public health order, and trust me, I have to read it, and I would encourage everybody not to do that. If you do look at the public health order, you'll see 1.5 pages all about masks. I'm going to make it really easy. When you leave home, put a mask on, okay? And you should leave it on everywhere you go. But they make it extremely complicated when they spell this thing out in the public health orders, when you've got to have it, when you don't. You have to have it now in the common areas at a strata complex, all of this stuff. So put it on, leave it on. If you are in your office and there is anybody else in your office, then again, you have to have it on. Whilst I'm talking about offices, I am aware that the police are going around offices, knocking on the doors and saying to people, can you show me reasons why you should be in the office? My wife, her office is in the city, it's in Piedmont, and she got a knock on the door. She had a couple of her people in there that were running off reports at the end of the month, and she got a knock on the door to ask them. The police said, what are you doing here? And they had to have a reason to be there. So if you're in your office, you should be pre-prepared to be saying to police, this is why I'm here. But
wear a mask.
wear a mask. motor vehicles, you should not be sharing a motor vehicle with anybody else except people of your own household. So if your children are living home with you and your wife obviously is there with you, you can get in the same car, but you should not be getting in a car with your work colleagues. And I know it's going to be inconvenient, but you shouldn't be getting in a car with your work colleagues. And I've mentioned commercial property. That's no longer a goer, and I apologise for that. Tom, we've been creating a lot of tools for people.
Yeah.
One of the documents that I will give you and Susan when we finish is a document that is a cheat sheet, if you will. Remember the days you're at school and you used to write everything down?
Yeah.
So I've created one of them. It'll now need updating because of what we've heard this morning, but it's still good enough to go out. And I'll send that to you, and you can send it out to those people who are participating in this webinar. And there's columns in it, and it'll say, can I do styling? Yes, no, and I will provide that to you. But can I just say to people, there has been now 22 changes to the public health law. Every time they do that, the document that Tom's going to send you out will change. So please go back to our website constantly and make sure you're looking at the latest one.
Yeah, make it.
So that's the best thing that we can do there. And there's a series of other documents there, Tom, which we making available about when a tenant says, I'm not paying the rent, I can't. So that's good. There's documents there for you to gather the information, more documents to get instructions from the landlord, this sort of thing. So please go and access them. We've tried to standardise things as much as we can.
So make it a favourite, everyone, on your browser, the REI and New South Wales website, because it's the click one button and you're getting a lot of information at the one time. I'm also so we will send out the cheat sheet, Tim. We will send it out, and also in the comments on this Facebook, as well as in an email that's going to follow this video that we're going to send out to the 20 or those thousand database that we've got, Tim. I'm also going to put in a link there. Dan White, the CEO of Ray White, had reached out to you and me and a few others. Just a link there on hardship stories. It's self-explanatory on hardship stories of why real estate should continue to be operating and to be perceived as being essential. If you can actually contribute, if you've got situations that support it, because one thing is for sure, as an industry, as Tim has said, this is an absolute privilege for us to be able to operate under the current circumstances. And we do think that this has got a lot to do with helping, particularly, Tim, there are people that have sold a house that need to buy a house. There are people that are in financial strife that have to sell a house. There are people that are sort of in limbo that need to move into other accommodation. And all we want to do is to make sure that this information is collated in one spot. And I think, Dan White has actually just created a link there in view of providing this to, I think that might, I'm not sure he's providing it to you or he's providing it to the government. I think, everyone's on the same side of the fence here now, stressing the importance that the real estate industry has in the current landscape. Because, Tim, I've got to tell you, the other thing is I've had a lot of social media private messages through people that I'm connected with, sending me out of the blue, can I refer them to an agent in an area because of financial strife? Now, that hasn't happened to me for some time, where you said, lost our job, we're preempting, we can't live off the 750. We want to sell this investment property we've got. So I do think, regardless, Tim, regardless of why us as agents want this industry to keep ticking over in New South Wales, it's the consumers. There are consumers out there, Tim, that need to actually go and look at property.
Oh, 100%. And as I said earlier, We need food, we need water, and we need shelter. And I think that's the reason we have that exception, Tom. That's why we're there.
And what do I say to my daughter in year 12 that said to me, but Daddy, why do we need a Dan Murphy's open?
Well, I think the answer to that is in South Africa, they closed all the Dan Murphy equivalents, so you couldn't buy alcohol. And that taught the world something about doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there is actually a reference point we can use to see what actually happened.
Yeah, but they didn't continue with that because there was rioting over there and they tore the town apart. So they decided that wasn't a very smart thing to do.
Well, without going into too much detail, Tim, many, many years ago, I spoke at a conference at a Buddhist temple, believe it or not, and it had a bunch of real estate guys and girls there for 3 nights. And I've got to tell you, it was only vegetarian food and there was no alcohol. So you can just picture a 3-day conference. You'd finish the conference. At the end of the second night, they could not be held back. They broke out of the conference and they headed off to the local club, which I think was called the Warilla Leagues Club or RSL Club. I'm not too sure. They couldn't go 40. They went 48 hours, but they needed to have a beer.
Yeah, I get it.
Now, that's the other thing. Tim, let's, off this, and you've been extremely useful sharing this information, interpreting it, and you're always very thoughtful. You don't jump in. You actually give very thoughtful answers. But from a health and productive perspective, Tim, I think it's important for all our listeners to know that, hey, listen, you got an opportunity to do a bit of work, spend a bit of time on family, have a bit of time to yourself, but please don't hit the Dan Murphys at lunchtime. You'd hit the telephones before you hit Dan Murphys, because you can, Tim, and I saw it happen in Melbourne last year. I've got a very big client base in Victoria, and I saw it. They fell on a pajama slope at around the 3rd month, because 1 month went into the other month. They had an extended lockdown in Victoria, right? And agents did fall into a bit of a pajama slope where they'd wake up a little bit later, and then they started, drinking a little bit more regularly. And then the issue is that when they came out of lockdown, it was it was like they'd been on a 4-month holiday. And we know how hard it is to come back to work on your first day after a 3-week break,
Yeah.
So don't set yourself up for a hard comeback once the doors open.
No, that's good advice. It really is. It really is good advice.
All right, thank you,
All right, mate.
sir. Stay
Thanks
well.
once again for the opportunity to get the message out through your extensive network. I appreciate it.
Listen, Susan, am I not answering this question here? Let me just see, or has it been answered? It was from Violet. Let me just see. No, I think it's been answered. Beautiful. It's been
All right.
Thank you. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Can the agent from Greater Sydney sell in the Hawkesbury area?
I'm not sure where Hawkesbury fits. If is it in Greater Sydney? I know it goes up to. I know it goes up the Greater Sydney area. That is goes up to the Central Coast in that. I'm just trying to work out where the Hawkesbury area.
If it goes to the Central Coast, let's make the assumption that it does. If it does, Tim.
Well, if it is in the Greater Sydney area, the answer is yes. You can do that. You can go in that area. In fact, you can go in the 50-kilometre band that I spoke about in that area, because you can't do that from home, and it is a reasonable excuse to be dealing with residential property.
Stay well, Tim. We might talk next week. See what we get. See what we find. Or even if you think that public health order number 23, I think it is, if you process that and you've got something you want to share, just give me a call. Text
We're going to, if I can set this up, Tom, where we will be doing an interview with some folks from government, the people they'll try and give us some indication or give us some assistance about how to make application for the loans and the grants and all this sort of stuff. So I'll let you know about that,
Please.
and maybe we can join you in on it.
Oh, we'd get a big audience for that one, Tim. So,
Yeah.
all righty. Thank
See
you.
you, Tom.
Bye.
See you, bro.
Bye-bye.